No one can stop me from getting what I want, especially not you!
Hello everyone, and welcome back to a critical retrospective. I'm sorry that it's been so long since I last reviewed a season 6 episode, especially considering the fact that there are now like 3 more that are out. I'm fairly behind. However, I have been working on another video in tandem with this one, which explains the relatively long delay. You'll hear more about that pretty soon, don't worry. So, Sublimation released, the 3rd episode of season 6. You know, the one that got leaked to heck and back. For that reason, I wasn't really that excited for this episode leading up to its release, because I thought I'd already seen everything that there was to see. And to be fair, I was kind of right. Most everything about this episode I gleaned already from the leaks. And what I did see from the leaks, I wasn't the hugest fan of, if I'm being perfectly honest. And when I say that, I mean specifically some aspects of this episode really rubbed me the wrong way. But I don't want this video to just be a non-stop hate train about this episode, because there was also some really good stuff at play. Needless to say, this video is going to be a mixed bag. So without further ado, let's jump right in with by far the part of this episode that got me the most aggravated. In my Marinette video that came out in late December, I really tried my best to be as objective and as fair as possible. I really wanted to try and reach a healthy middle ground in this discourse, but this episode is really testing my resolve in that respect. I don't want to say that Marinette was absolutely insufferable in this episode, but I will say that she was getting really grating. This whole episode centers around Marinette trying to make friends with this new character, Sublime, who I'll get to in a bit, which, that doesn't sound too bad at first, right? Well, wrong, because they go about this in one of the worst ways I've ever seen, by completely regressing Marinette's character. See, in season 5, Marinette finally stopped trying to make overly complicated plans, not just for Adrian, but for things in general. She decided to, and I quote, take things as they are. But it seems that Oblivio got re-acclimatized, transcended realities, invaded Zag Studios, and erased the memories of everyone working on this episode, because I guess we just kind of forgot about that. It seems that Marinette is back to her regular season 1 quirky self, and I find it relatively annoying just because it feels like Marinette should have been way past these traits by now. In Illustrator, it was funny, it was charming, but now I'm starting to get sick of it already, and that's especially because of how she treats Sublime in this episode. I do understand to a point that Marinette is kind of anxious around people and just wants to make friends, but she's really annoying in this episode, I'm sorry. And it actually showcases how far her character has fallen since season 5 somehow. Do you all remember Marinette's stalkerish behaviors around Adrian, what with her knowing his schedule and everything? You know, the part of her character that was incredibly contentious? The part of her character that I'm really glad they ditched and kicked to the curb in season 5? Well, it seems that for old time's sake, they decided to bring it back. But this time, it's Sublime that Marinette is keeping tabs on. Now she knows everything about Sublime already, the things that she does, her hobbies, her interests, where she's from, her parents, all of it. I guess protection really did just mean nothing then after all. So much for Marinette learning to finally take things as they are or whatever. And it's just so disappointing to see. I was really hoping Marinette would finally make some permanent improvements to her character. I thought that she would take the lessons learned from the season 4 finale to heart, but instead she's doing this again. Now, I do understand to a point. Regression is a real thing. People in real life can slip back into toxic behaviors and mannerisms just because it's the only thing they know. But the problem with that in my eyes is that in this specific case, it's been absolutely ages of Marinette being this kind of freak. We've had to sit through 8 years of Marinette's zany antics, and they just decided to offset all of her character development in this respect to season 5, and that's pretty much it. And just when I finally think things are starting to take a turn for the better, they hit you with the old switcheroo once more. While I was watching this episode last week, I literally started to lose my patience a little bit. I didn't get angry or anything, just tired, burnt out, exhausted, whichever word you want to use, that's the way I felt. And to be fair, Illustrator is also guilty of Marinette's zany antics kind of getting in the way of things, but I didn't find it too bad there because she wasn't as annoying as she is here. It was just more cringy behavior in episode 2, but in this episode, it's actively getting irritating. After the Illustrator released, Thomas Astruc went on Twitter and defended Marinette's behaviour in that episode, saying that it's not realistic for Marinette to just automatically know exactly what to do after one kiss with Adrian or something. That accidentally unlearning the lessons that she learned is perfectly realistic, which, to be fair, yes it is. My problem lies in how long it took for us to get here anyway. When Marinette and Adrian finally stopped dancing around each other for an eternity, it meant that the stuff I actually really cared about in the show would actually get some more prevalence. But that's obviously not as true as I wanted it to be. Pity that. However, I'm not just going to rant and rave and say that this episode completely ruined Marinette's character, because in all honesty, there were some bright spots here. Specifically towards the end of the episode, when Marinette finally realizes that she was wrong and goes to apologize to Sublime, and Sublime accepts her apology. And then they actually become friends, just by talking. No excessive plans, no over-the-top expressions or anything. They just sit and talk, and they have a really nice heart-to-heart conversation. And it made the episode slightly less disconcerting to sit through, which I appreciate. Thanks, writers. But that still doesn't really change the fact that they still decided to keep this version of Marinette around for however long they wish to. To put it simply, it's season 6, and this whole thing is getting really old. However, this episode is not entirely doom and gloom. They do introduce a new character that I thoroughly enjoyed. So, let's explore that, shall we? Alright, I don't know how much of what I'm about to say is recency bias, but I'm just gonna say it. I love Sublime. Weird name aside, I already feel like she belongs in the cast very well. It feels like she should have been introduced ages ago, but I'll take what I can get, especially considering the fact that she's very interesting already. And I'm so surprised that they managed to pull this character off, considering just how easy it would have been to make her a Mary Sue-like character. Someone with absolutely no flaws, no struggles, a multitude of talents, and is good at absolutely everything that she does. But what's really funny and rather ironic about this is that the episode's introduction made me think that this was going to be the case. Sublime is introduced as this flawless child prodigy to an almost comical degree, and I started to think, oh no, she's gonna be Zoe again, isn't she? But the thing that she has that Zoe doesn't is struggles and flaws, you know, things that make a character a character. This is showcased very clearly in the middle of the episode where Sublime gives herself a pep talk in the bathroom. While she's getting ready for her running tryout, she starts to get really nervous. The fear has a chokehold on her and refuses to let go. And so Sublime's pep talk to herself ensues. And boy, is this one interesting scene to boot. Marinette was hiding in the bathroom stall thinking Sublime was yelling at her, especially considering the things that she was saying. No one can stop me from getting what I want, especially not you. This is such an interesting line from her, because it pretty much exemplifies everything that Sublime is entirely about, what she strives for. Perfection. And that means that no part of her at all can even be considered slightly imperfect by any means. And so, she externalizes it. She's not afraid. There's just something in her that's stopping her from getting what she wants. She's fighting against an outside force. And she's winning because she's perfect. It's such an interesting way of looking at her character and her struggles, because it serves as a microcosm of everything that she stands for. It gives us a look into her psyche, and the fact that she thinks that she's alone in this room is even more intriguing, because it paints a picture of her life. How many times has this happened to Sublime? How many times has this fear gotten a hold of her before an important event? How many times has she, completely alone in the dark and afraid, screamed at herself to get a grip already? And this is why the start is so intriguing and recontextualizes everything about her after rewatching the episode. When I watched this episode for the first time, I honestly found it really weird how comically perfect Sublime was in front of others. But after watching it again, especially considering that bathroom scene giving us so much more context to what she's really going through, everything finally falls into place. Perfect Sublime is an act that she puts on in front of other people to make herself seem more refined than she actually is. She hides all of her fears and insecurities and imperfections behind a mask, and then yells at that mask to be more perfect, more realistic when she's alone. Or maybe just to be better, like her mother constantly urges her to be. And honestly, this stupid mother, can I just say, I feel like 90% of Sublime's issues come from this lady alone, because clearly her father cares for her tremendously, and obviously her mother does too, I'm not saying that, but her parenting approach is completely off base. The lack of co-parenting between these two is exemplified incredibly strongly before Sublime starts running. Her hands start shaking again, and the nerves get the best of her once more. Her father comes to comfort her, tells her that it's okay to be afraid, and that it's okay not to succeed all the time. Sublime is comforted by this, until her mother shows up and starts to flush away all of that goodwill almost immediately, by demeaning Sublime's father, telling her that he's a loser, then giving her her own charged advice. Once again, externalizing Sublime's fear as an outside force that she can control, really trying to hammer home into Sublime's mind that she has to do things perfectly. And this contextualizes things even more than the bathroom scene probably already did, because now we know where all of this came from. Her mother. And while her father did try to make things better for Sublime and teach her that negative emotions and feelings are perfectly valid, and she doesn't need to hide behind this mask of perfection anymore, her mother completely undermines everything that he's trying to do. And so Sublime, subconsciously, is forced to reconcile what her mother is saying and what her father is saying and pick what's most important to her. And so, because of how much more forceful her mother is being, especially considering the fact that she's literally saying that what her father is saying is bad and wrong, Sublime gives in to her mother. It's sad, but it's true. And this is why Sublime is such an interesting character for me, and she's already become one of my favorites, because it says something really interesting about perfectionism and co-parenting and all of that. The horrors of being a child prodigy. The horrors of sublimation. Overall, this episode sits in a strange place for me. There's a lot of stuff that I absolutely adore, and a lot of stuff that I'm not the hugest fan of, specifically Marinette's behavior in this episode. But when I take a step back and look at what this episode actually managed to get me to think about, I appreciate it. I appreciate what it says about the real world, and I appreciate what I was able to glean from it because of what it's done, specifically what it's done with the character of Sublime. However, what it's done with Marinette is just kind of egregious to me. It sounds silly, but I just want to have my cake and eat it too, you know? I don't want one character's development to become stagnant at the expense of another's ascension. Why can't Marinette and Sublime have had really good showings in this episode? I mean, if Miraculous World Paris has shown us anything, it's that the Miraculous Ladybug writers can actually write good story arcs for multiple characters and pull it off incredibly well. So I don't really know what happened with this episode. Maybe it's because of the leaks, and I was already predisposed to dislike certain aspects of it because I had so much time to chew on this? I honestly don't know, and I don't think I'll ever know. But you know what? I think I'm okay with that. While Marinette didn't have the best showing in this episode, the other character, Sublime, genuinely made me think about a few things for a second there. I genuinely cannot stress enough how much I love Sublime's character, but you've already heard me gush about her in the previous section, so I won't repeat myself here. I'll just leave you with this closing statement. If the next Miraculous Ladybug Season 6 episode I review has little to do with Marinette and more to do with other characters and their development, I will be a happy camper. Oh!